Buenas tardes. It's always difficult to follow Hugo Ventura, particularly this late in the day, and particularly if you have stolen some slides from him. I want to start by thanking you, by thanking SICA and AEA for inviting us and for supporting the project that my colleague and partner in crime, Ana Maria Majano from INCAE, and I are going to present in the next half hour. Secondly, I would like to thank CDKN, the Climate and Development Knowledge Network, an important initiative headquartered in the United Kingdom, which is the other major supporter of our work. And I want to thank you, of course, for still staying here with us this late in the day. We really feel very honored that you have invited us and that you're listening to us. In fact, I think this is probably the second largest audience in San Jose today after the Central America Games. So, I hope you like what you hear from us, the athletes turned researchers. And however much you like it, don't set the roof on fire like they did yesterday. All right, so the report that we're going to present some insights from here today is part of a broader and relatively ambitious initiative that Worldwatch and INCAE have encountered on, and it's called Central America Sustainable Energy Development Initiative. And you see the three phases of the initiative on this slide here. We're moving towards the end of the current phase, the phase one, and those are most of the insights we're presenting here today. We're looking in the report at the status of renewable energies in the region. We're doing what we call a gap analysis, gaps both in terms of information gaps and research gaps that we think should be filled to move the region forward, as well as policy gaps. We are portraying some success stories in the region that the region can build on, that they can scale up and replicate. And we're identifying some high impact areas and some recommendations for how to move forward. Just very quickly, the following phases will develop sustainable energy action roadmaps. So against the background of these initial findings, we're trying to develop very concrete actions that can be implemented, and they are focused on the following three areas. One, how to give access to energy to the communities in Central America that are currently under service, so what's called electrification. Secondly, how can wood be used more sustainably, and what alternatives to unsustainable wood use, leña, do exist in the region. And thirdly, how to decrease fossil fuel consumption growth through small-scale and large-scale renewable energies. We also hope to be able and hope to find the support to not just come up with these action roadmaps, but to implement a third phase starting already mid-next year, which will then train decision makers, policy makers, commercial banks, international banks in these findings on different levels, regional, national, and subnational level, to really equip stakeholders with the knowledge to use the roadmap data for new project development and policy improvements. What you see here is a graphic of a methodology we've developed at the Worldwatch Institute, and you see this is a very holistic approach. The work that we are doing here in Central America is not yet a full-fledged roadmap, because it's difficult to do at the regional level with the time that we had and the resources we had available, but it's still using the main components of what we need altogether, can help design and employ a sustainable energy system from the roadmaps. So the presentation that we give you is in these four areas. We're looking into technical assessments, we're looking into socioeconomic analysis, we're looking at financing and investment in the region, and finally we come up with some policy recommendations. So let me jump in and present some of the key findings. This first part is looking, as I said, at the technical analysis, both of the status quo and of future potentials for renewable energy in the region. This is the first slide that tells an ambivalent story, and Hugo and other presenters here earlier today have presented similar slides, so I'm not going into the details with such a distinguished audience that probably knows most of this, but there are really two key messages that this slide tells, and it's a altogether somewhat ambivalent story. The first one is you do see the large share of renewable energies in total electricity generation, 62% in 2011, the last year where we have reliable numbers. And this total electricity generation from renewables has actually more than doubled in the last 20 years. So it establishes Central America as a real leader, in our view, on renewable electricity production. But, and that's the big but, there's also a second story told here, and that is that the share of renewable electricity production overall has decreased from 91% in 1990 to just about a little bit more than 60% in 2011. So the share of the total produced has almost doubled, but the share in overall electricity production has decreased. And what does this mean? It means that the share of fossil fuels in electricity production has increased and now makes up more than a third of electricity production. We argue in the report that this is not in the best interest of Central America, and that it can and it should be changed. So despite some worrying trends, we feature a number of very exciting success stories in the report. They are success stories really at many different levels, different pieces of the puzzle that all together can become what can be called a sustainable energy system. So an energy system that is socially and economically and environmentally sustainable. And I just put some of those highlighted stories up here. They're really from across the region. On the technical side, we have micro hydropower in Guatemala. We have the wind cooperatives in Costa Rica. We have a bagasse power plant in Belize that is working quite well. We have small-scale wind and solar in Nicaragua and rural solar initiatives in Nicaragua. All of these technology developments, technology deployments that we think can be replicated elsewhere, success stories that can be scaled up. We have found very interesting initiatives that address knowledge gaps and that try to work on education. For example, the capacity building programs through universities in Honduras. We have found ways of developing innovative financing like green microfinance in Honduras. And on the policy side, we found a lot of good things to start off, a lot of things that are working already. Public tendering in Panama, net metering programs in Costa Rica, and the recent reforms on regulation and the legal environment in Nicaragua. So one of our key messages from the report is really that the potential, the full potential that is there for renewable energies has not been harvested yet. And that's really good news for the region because you can develop into this. This is just one example from geothermal, the potential of geothermal. And you do see the installed current capacity in megawatts, which is 558 megawatts. And then you see the estimated potential in the middle, which is at the very minimum 5 times what has currently been employed. But at maximum it is 26 times what is currently being used. So this is enormous, and we can say the same about wind, we can say the same about hydro, we can say the same about sustainable small hydro and solar, and biomass as well. So this is all very good news. There is a lot of potential that has not been used yet. So altogether, I want to really summarize this first part in the following points. The available knowledge on existing renewable energies and the renewable potential of the future can be summarized as follows. Central America, in our view, is a leader in certain renewable energies with very ambitious goals in most renewable energies. Hydropower and geothermal are very well established in the region. Wind power is now actively pursued in some of the countries. Utility scale solar has just been developed for the first time within the last year, and Dr. Jimenez mentioned those projects already. It's Miravalles in Costa Rica and La Trinidad in Nicaragua. And other forms are being harvested, are starting to be harvested, including agricultural biomass or gas for electricity generation, biofuels for transportation, and there is a number of interesting projects that develop alternatives for inefficient household fuel use. So this is really all good news, but there is, as we have learned already earlier today, still a very high use of traditional biomass for cooking in some of the countries. There is a growing dependence on fossil fuels with some very worrying socioeconomic impacts, and there are significant untapped potentials that could that could be harvested instead of fossil fuels. The report defines a few key enablers in the area of technology information, because we believe that technology information is a key condition for smart policy making. First of all, good news, we see that there are countrywide resource assessments that are sufficient to serve as guides for initial analysis and government energy planning, and also for private developers. We are not as certain that the detailed zone-by-zone assessments exist for all technologies. And the kind of assessments that I mean would then include detailed information on different geographic areas, including information on the variability of resources, say of wind and solar sources through the season, so seasonal assessments, as well as throughout the day. And we would argue that you need that to do smart, integrated policy making. We're interested in your views. Maybe we haven't found everything. We have heard about a lot of assessments that are available to private developers or that have been produced by private developers that governments have not yet access to. So this is an area that we identify as one where progress can most likely be made. I have a number of assessments here in front of me, but we've been presented some information on these already earlier today, so I'm not going to go into the details of that. What we would argue for is that there is a need for more integrated planning across zones and regions, across technologies. How can technologies be integrated in a mix? And to start thinking about integrated planning that also includes energy efficiency and transmission and distribution, and possibly even storage of renewable electricity. Information that is produced in a joint process, in a joint stakeholder process that brings together information from the key actors. So I think one of the problems in the past was that engineers talked to engineers, but there was not enough exchange to, say, the commercial banks. There was not enough exchange with policy and decision makers or investors. And integrated smart policy making does have to deliver that. So the second part is that we're looking into in the report is what do we know about the socioeconomic impacts of renewable energies? Complicated slide that probably some of you in the back rows won't be able to see. Just really one key story here. These are the numbers for oil expenditures, the numbers that countries pay for the import of oil as share of overall GDP. And what you see is that in 2007, just at the beginning of this 5-year frame, $8.6 billion were paid for the import of fossil fuels, so about 7.3% of overall GDP in the region. And this has increased by, 3/4, almost doubled to $13.2 billion in 2011. So just within these 5 years, despite an economic crisis that in many countries brought those numbers down, in this particular region, the expenditures for the import of fossil fuels have increased heavily. Some countries spending 15% and more on oil imports. These are 15% that are shipped out of the country that create wealth, yes, here at home, but also elsewhere, despite the enormous resources that we see for renewables that would make it possible to cover the energy needs from resources, from clean resources here at home. So why not produce the energy demand? Why not cover supply the energy demand by domestic resources? From the information that we have evaluated, cost, at least at the level of Central American societies, can no longer be an excuse. This is only showing you 3 numbers here for 3 different energy technologies in what is called levelized cost of energy. So for those of you not familiar with LCOEs, what LCOEs do is they compare the cost of different energy sources, including installation of energy, operation and management, and fuel costs, which in the case of renewables, of course, are zero because the renewable resources are available for free. And what you see is that at least for the case of geothermal is fully price competitive, even given the general system and the general market, where we would argue there's a number of market failures because externalities are not yet included. And this is exactly what I'm showing here on the second slide. It is a difference whether we compare the prices for utilities today and what it costs them to produce electricity from different energy sources and the costs that our societies really pay for it. There's a big difference for this, and I probably don't need to tell you this. There are very real costs for cleaning up the local environment. Many of the current energy technologies needed produce very significant healthcare costs. We haven't seen concrete numbers for Central America yet. We would love to work on them. And we would love to showcase them in our report. So if you have some, please come see us. But I can give you 2 numbers from some of the bigger countries that actually do have their own fossil fuel resources. For example, the United States. According to a recent analysis, $120 billion are spent every year in the United States just on addressing the pollution costs and the related healthcare costs of coal. No oil, no future climate change, no subsidies, only cleaning up the environment and addressing healthcare costs. So these are enormous numbers. China estimates 10% of its GDP is spent on cleaning up the environment, 10% of its GDP. And those are all costs, very real costs to all of you living here that are not, of course, not internalized in the price. So if we talk about these LCOEs that let geothermal already look good, keep in mind that these costs are all not included, and these are very real costs our societies are paying. So in our view, there's a clear socioeconomic advantage of renewable energies over fossil fuels, not just for geothermal, but also for the other major resources, at least in certain regions of Central America. That at the very least. And we do believe there is a need for institutes and for researchers to work on these country-specific, what we call LCOE pluses, so that include these real costs to societies at the country level. And we haven't seen those being made yet.